Hello and welcome to this edition of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. How are you, Marina? How's
I'm
your week been?
I'm very well, thank you. It's involved a lot of sport. I went to Lord's and I went to Wimbledon.
Whoa.
Yes, and it's on that basis, it's been absolutely terrific. How about you?
I went down to the set of the Thursday Murder Club movie. That was very, very exciting. Met Sabine, met Helen Mirren,
Dame Helen.
Dame Helen,
Can we use all the titles, please?
Sir Pierce Brosnan,
Yeah.
and Lord Celia Imrie. It was terrific fun, and I've shared a few pictures, but we won't bang on about that because we've got an awful lot to talk about
We have
today.
got a lot to get through. We are going to talk about this big wedding in India, and we're going to talk particularly about the idea of musicians doing private gigs.
And how much they get paid.
How much you get paid.
Spoiler, it's quite a lot.
Yeah, for selling your magic.
Yeah.
For selling your magic. We are also, what else are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about a little bit about K-pop because there's a reality show that's about to come out, and we're going to talk about what K-pop is, the K-pop idol industry, and I've been doing a deep statistical dive. If anything is going to make people turn off, it is that.
I'm dying right on.
I've done some original research into something I think is quite interesting at the end of that. I suspect most people will disagree with me. Should we start with TV schedules and why our favourite shows are taking so long to come back now?
Oh my goodness, this is becoming an increasingly vocal complaint. Last week we learned that Euphoria, which is the HBO show, Sam Levinson is the showrunner on that. That is going to be pushed back again. Now that makes it at least 3 years between seasons. They say there's going to be a time jump. It's like, yeah, I should think so. They're going to be in their 30s by the end of this. Stranger Things. There's going to be at least 3 and more years between season 4 and
Oh,
season
really?
5. Yeah, and people keep saying, "Oh, the pandemic." Yeah, but and the writer's strike.
Yes.
We're not talking about the pandemic anymore, and the writer's strike is not enough to account for that. Yellowstone. We had season 4 in 2021. Season 5, the final season, started in 2022. Richard. Then it's had a very long hiatus, and we're going to see the second half of season 5 premiere in November 2024.
Okay.
That's just the second half of a series that started back in 2022. So,
What's the reason behind
well,
that?
the reason, well, there were certain shows have always had this issue. HBO used to have this issue quite a lot with Game of Thrones because it was a very high production value series. It's a huge thing to produce, had many episodes. But now it seems like every single show at all, even things with simple one sets or effectively one set, I don't know, it's a police station or whatever it is they've got an 18-month turnaround at minimum. Now, the reason it's particularly pissing people off is because lots of these are American shows. We come from a culture where, it's fine to have 6.5 hours in a sitcom, and that is normal. But you expect it to come back in timely fashion. You don't want 2.5 years between the seasons, because what's happening now is people are feeling like, oh my God, I can't even remember it. I've got to re-watch the whole of that season. American TV used to do 35, network television, the most sort of brutal marketplace, the most brutal kind of factory in lots of ways. They used to do 35, 40 episodes of something a year. This came down, and then it became just sort of 35 episodes. And then it sort of settled around 22, 26, somewhere around that mark in a season. And you would start in September and you would finish in May. But since we've gone into the world of streaming, the gaps have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are various reasons for that. First of all, one of the reasons, this is a sort of side reason, and then I'll do a full rundown and how you get one of these prestige shows from green light to when you are actually able to watch it. One thing is that a lot of these showrunners will have their other pet projects that they have been quite indulgently allowed to do. And I'm not saying that's what's happened at all with Sam Levinson, who is the showrunner of Euphoria, but he went off to do The Idol with the thing with The Weeknd and Lily Rose Depp.
Did he? That would hold you up.
Yeah, that really held a lot of things up. But Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney, people who are in Euphoria, you see now they've become, their careers blow up. They become movie stars. Maybe Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, and he's Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. He's in other movies. So what's happening in the old days? You used to have TV stars would be a TV star. Now people like to be in TV and it's prestige, but they also like to go and make their movies. So you've got scheduling conflicts.
So in the old days, famously, if you signed up to do the American Office, you were signed up for 7 seasons.
Hugh Laurie signs up for House, and he signs up to do it, and he's committed. If it continues to go, it continues to go, and you're basically handcuffed to it.
So 7 seasons, like K-pop, the abattoir of dreams. You are absolutely tied. You are yoked to that for
Yeah.
7 years.
And it's grueling, and you're
Yeah.
making how many episodes? So if you want in your 3 months off to go and do a movie, that's on you, but it's got to fit in then.
And that is not the case with something like Euphoria and the streamers. They don't have those
No.
network contracts are not the same.
And
Okay.
Millie Bobby Brown is whether or not she's a movie star or a movie star on Netflix, but she's got lots of other projects that she wants to do, and you can't have Stranger Things without 11. So there's lots of waiting around, but writers' rooms can also go on a lot longer, and writer availability may also change, but. Let's have a look at the theoretical timeline. This is why it takes so unbelievably long. Okay,
Let's imagine we pitched a big hit show.
I have talked to people whose job it is to get big prestige TV over the line, and thank you very much for the assistance.
So we've pitched a show called Dogs on Mars.
Dogs on Mars.
Where
okay.
two dogs accidentally get stranded on Mars and start a world, and then they develop consciousness. And we've sold
I love it.
Yeah.
Season 1
Everyone loves it.
Drops. All the episodes drop at once. Now, in the old days, they would drop once a week, and you'd be able to see by about week 3. People love Dogs on Mars. They absolutely love it,
crazy.
and they've gone crazy for this. We're
They're
getting a green
barking
light.
mad.
Let's get started. Let's put stuff in place for season 2. They're barking mad.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
But now streamers like to wait. They drop it all, and then they wait 6 to 8 weeks, and that's when they make their pickup decision. So then we're already 2 months after that first season of Dogs on Mars has dropped, and it's going to take. So then you get a green light, and they say, "Right, we've had a look at this. Let's go." But it's going to take a month to get the writers' room starting all over again. And if you hope that they've got deals for season 2, but they might not have. And either way, so let's say they have got it all organised.
Yeah.
So that's 3 months now after it's dropped.
So
the
you haven't
whole
even
thing
started.
in its entirety. And Dogs on Mars, the writers' room season 2 has not even begun. It begins. Now,
Meanwhile, the stars of Dogs on Mars have gone absolutely stellar. I mean, people they're doing the chat shows and all sorts of things.
Oh yeah, and they're being offered all sorts of other things. They want to have a tequila brand and a makeup line.
Yes, perfect. Tequila
now,
for dogs.
This is
Tequila
a
for
prestige
dogs.
show. It goes without saying it's a prestige show. It's a 1-hour prestige show, Dogs on Mars. And so you want say you're getting an 8-episode order.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are not happy. They think that's too little, but it's an 8-episode order. So you will want at least a 20-week writer's room for that. So and then you'll got to think, well, Dogs on Mars is pretty VX heavy. We're on Mars,
Yes. And
might involve some location work.
And their dogs.
Yeah, and the dogs.
Come on.
And, these are show dogs.
Yeah. I mean,
These are show dogs.
spoiler, they're not real dogs. We're not really on Mars.
Yeah. So you might be shooting in a volume stage. So you've got all the heads of department.
What's a volume stage?
A volume stage is a round, it's like screens that go all the way around, and it means that you send a tiny location crew to go and film with these special cameras, and then you surround the stage with what a tiny crew, well, a relatively small crew has shot, and it moves with the actors. It's really incredible, but
it's like an immersive.
It's an immersive stage.
Yeah.
It's very high tech, and some people love using them, and some people don't. But a lot of shows employ them if they're kind of particularly in fantasy.
We need one on Dogs in Mars. I think.
We're having one. That
great.
just goes without question. Anyway, so then you've got to get them all starting to prep it all. And so we're now 6 months after season 1 and it has dropped, and they're just trying to say, right, what are the locations? You're going to Jupiter as well this time. Okay, that's a whole nother thing we've got to rebuild. So then,
wait, sorry, I'm just looking in the notes from the writers' room. You say there are cats now,
yeah,
and we're like, the enemies,
and the cats' availability is complicated to cast. Blah blah. So the shoot will only begin 9 months after the first season of Dogs on Mars has done it. Now, say it's 15 days per episode because this is a prestige show.
Yes.
So that's 120 days. So
and in dog days, that's almost 90.
Yeah. So, I mean, they'll be like, talk about the Euphoria cast being in their 30s. These guys are going to get really old during the actual shoot.
They really are.
And then you've got to add additional days. The company moves from Mars to Jupiter, whatever it is. So you're looking at a 7-month shoot. So 16 months after Dogs on Mars season 1 dropped, you're now having to start post-production, all the VFX, so this could take 6 or 8 months very easily.
Yeah.
You've then got to do this thing that they now, because everyone does worldwide day and date release now, which you'll notice in the old days it used to come out in America, and we'd hope that Channel 4 bought it or something like that so that we'd be able to see it. And it didn't matter. Now everything has to be got ready for day and date in all the territories. So that means the dubbing, the language, the subtitles, and that takes a long time. So it's in all the different countries. So that you've got to take another 6 weeks on that. So that takes you already, if this process runs totally smoothly, to an 18-month drop thing between season 1 and season 2 drop. This is a real nightmare. Viewer engagement is sort of falling off because people can't remember it. There's so much TV around, they don't have time to rewatch it. Marketing wise, you've got to, the season recaps at the start of some of these things are
huge.
about 40 minutes while you try and remember everything that
And
happened.
also, by the way, it's very much like an episode of Grand Designs in that you can say, look, with all the wood in the world, this is going to take us 18 months.
Yeah.
But there's, just like in Grand Designs when the glass hasn't arrived from Holland,
Yeah.
there will be one of the stars has hurt themselves or is in a theatre thing, and so suddenly you've got to knock it back 6 weeks there, and then the DOP is doing something on another job, but you have to have that DOP, and so that's another month. So you're adding months and months and months just for tiny little things for absolute key cast and crew. Even if you've got everyone signed up to a absolute rock solid contract, there are things that happen all the time that locations suddenly become unavailable. There's always something that
which
that
will
shifts you back.
massively shift it by and all of those moving parts. The knock on is huge. But it's interesting. So Lost, which has just become available on Netflix in the US, you can watch it on Disney Plus in the UK. But there's been a lot of talk about it because when one of these series comes back on, everyone's like, "Oh, I remember that," and other people discover it. But Lost was a network show. Now it came back year after year in the same slot, and they made many, many, many episodes of it. So fans are annoyed and think this is possible. You're insulting me. I don't want. And they are dropping off. And so, in terms of what can be done to change it, it's really hard to give a season 2 green light before season 1 has dropped because you just don't.
You never know.
You never know. And if it hasn't hit, it's so expensive. This stuff is Prestige, Dogs on Mars.
Yeah,
it's an expensive show.
But also, from personal experience, you do not want to be doing a second series of something where the first series hasn't worked. It is not fun for anybody. It's almost always unsavable. Unless you come up with a really, really smart reinvention of it. No one is having fun doing that.
Yeah. So now people are trying to say, but also you're doing all for 8 episodes, and that's just not enough for a lot of people. They're just thinking, we didn't used to have it like this, and why do we have to have it now? So some people think that what you could do is try and go 12 to 16 episodes, and then you divide them in half, and you have a sort of hiatus, and then you can see how the first half does. And maybe you can get the writers' room. You can say, okay, we want to order the scripts. We get the writers' room going. We order the script. We may not proceed.
Yeah,
that's less expensive, but more.
But still expensive.
It's still expensive, but more episodes over the season obviously amortizes the spending over the season, and it really helps. But you hear so many more complaints about this. People are not really that willing to stand for it, and when you see. Or they just fall away as viewers of the show. Just think, I'm giving up. I'm not honestly waiting 3 years between seasons.
Yeah, and also, by the way, something else comes up.
Yeah.
Some other amazing show which you're not going to get a season 2 of comes up. I mean, there's constant churn.
Yes, and also, I mean, if you're actually selling, licensing things, it's going to help if we have more episodes of lots of these shows. But something like Lost coming on, which is a big moment this month, and lots of people will discover that series for the first time, and people will think, why can't we have more like this? Why can't we have more and it appear in a timely fashion? And I think that that's going to become a bigger and bigger deal as people have to, that we're going to make half as many shows as we were during peak TV. Now the streaming wars have been won. But I think that there will be a tighter schedule so that people just, otherwise it's such an investment that you're kind of, to watch fans fall away because they honestly can't, they haven't got time to watch. And also, I mean, season 4 of Stranger Things, some of the episodes were so long. They're no longer an hour. They're like an hour and 40 minutes or whatever they are. And I think that just this is not a shade on the Duffer Brothers at all because people love the show, but some creators, some showrunners have been indulged in all sorts of different things, and I think you're going to see a return to something more regimented and more with kind of delivery dates that have to happen.
Well, that's another reason behind it, I think, because there are now far more customers. If you are the Duffer Brothers or you're a big showrunner, in the olden days when you were just working for the networks, then there weren't very many other places you can go. So you sort of fit in. If the networks need 22 episodes a year, you're like, do you know what? That's my job. And I'm going to do it. And the fans want 22, so that's what I'll do. Now, Netflix, Amazon, they need to give you something to entice you from the networks. And what they gave people was freedom. And what they gave people was, if you do this, you can do another show. It's gone now, by the way, all of that. They're far more sort of going back to what the networks were doing. But that was the way that they got showrunners. And showrunners are creative people. And of course, they want to spend a bit more time doing stuff. And of course, they want to indulge another passion. And so they've been allowed to let things slide. And what used to be sort of a factory and even the most creative people understood they worked in a factory and were happy to work in a factory. They haven't had to for
It's
the
become
last
an artist studio.
10 years. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's going to have to return to
Yeah.
more of a
And
factory
I think
setting.
it will. I mean, with books,
Season 3 of Dogs on Mars is
Yes.
set in a factory.
yeah. But listen,
It's a lot cheaper.
with Dogs on Mars, we would find a way that we would have
Yeah.
episodes every year. I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't allow
No,
18 months.
well, I was about to say,
Yeah.
your schedule.
I write a book a year and I write a book
What's
a
everyone
year.
else doing, Richard?
Because-
What's everyone else doing?
Well, lots of people do. Lee Child does a book a year, and that's what I like to do because, firstly, it's doable.
No.
If you, it is doable. Plenty of people do it, and secondly, an audience wants a book a year, and we aren't anything without an audience. It doesn't. We don't really exist without an audience. So an audience wants a book a year. So I'll write a book a year, for as long as I can. Lee Child's done. He did like 24 years, and now then his brother took over. But there's so much stuff now. There are so many TV shows. There are so many books, and I do one a year, and people still say, "Can you not do more?" Because it's been a year since the last one. You go, "No, that I can't do." A year is about.
I'm at capacity now.
I am absolutely at capacity, but I do think if you work in a certain industry and you understand what that industry is, then it's important to put stuff. There's always reasons why people can't do it, but if you can do it, I think it's a really great
I agree.
thing to do.
In some ways, this is this story of what's happened in television, or what I think will happen, is sort of like what happens at the end of the 70s in Hollywood, where you have this decade where these creators are given huge amounts of money, and sometimes they make amazing films, and then sometimes they nearly collapse studios, and sometimes they do collapse studios, and then suddenly the people who win at the end of that are people like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, who deliver, who don't cause chaos, and who do what they say they're going to do. And yes, of course, there are some delays built into that, but nothing unreasonable. And they actually become, they are bankable for that reason.
And by the way, make amazing films. That's the key.
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. I'm not saying that these people aren't making amazing television shows. It's just taking too long.
Taking a really long time.
And as we say, that kind of contraction in the market, and Netflix no longer because they've won, no longer need to say, "Here, you can have a special deal with us now." It's like you're going to actually have to conform more to schedules, to things that we want, rather than you just being able to go and do anything with all our money.
Yeah, and Netflix as well, because I suspect that they are now far more in the market for precinct shows that run and run and run and run. Those older contracts with again, actors would go, "Yeah, I'll come to Netflix because you'll pay me for a one-off series, and I don't have to sign these ridiculous contracts I used to sign at the networks." I suspect they may have to start signing some of the ridiculous contracts they used to sign at the networks, and it means everything.
And the shows are going to be scheduled week after week. There's an ad tier.
Yeah,
as we say, you disrupted an entire market, and now you are making yourself look very like that previous market.
It's clever, right?
Yeah.
Shall we go to a break?
Let's segue right into that.
This episode is brought to you by Sky.
Now, Richard, you have a brother.
I do.
The wonderful Matt Osman from Suede.
Why do you ask?
Would you describe yourselves as close?
Yes, different industries, but yeah, we love each other.
You sound closer than the two brothers in the new Sky original, Mr Bigstuff. Stars Danny Dyer as Lee,
please.
an alpha male with a prescription drug addiction, as well as a biscuit tin full of their dad's ashes. Also, yes, please. And Ryan Sampson as Glenn, a nervy perfectionist and carpet salesman striving to live the suburban ideal with his fiancée. Glenn's life is very peaceful and exactly how he likes it until his brother comes crashing into their lives, and it's not long before their perfect lives start to unravel faster than the weave of a cheap carpet. Ryan Sampson also wrote the series. He's an absolutely fantastic comic actor. He was in Plebs and, of course, Brassic, another Sky comedy.
All episodes available to watch now, only on Sky.
Welcome back, everybody. What is up next, please, Richard?
K-pop. The K is for Korea. I don't know why they don't call it soul music, but it's called K-pop. The BBC have commissioned a reality show called Made in Korea, the K-pop experience, from a very experienced team who did X Factor and all sorts of things, Nigel Hall and lots of other great producers. So I suspect it'll be great, but it essentially follows the process of how a K-pop band is formed, which in and of itself is fascinating. And the world of K-pop has absolutely transformed the world of music and culture. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
BTS and all these groups are absolutely massive.
We should say that in this show, they're going to take 5 UK boys and transplant them to Seoul.
And
go through the process.
Yeah, the idol process, which is, we think we understand how to put a boy band together, and you take that together from an advert in the stage, and they do a couple of dancing auditions, and they can all sing together, and off you go. The K-pop thing is that on just it is almost impossible to overestimate how many steroids that process would be on
Yeah.
to get the K-pop process. They get hundreds of thousands of applicants.
They're big. We should say they're big management companies
Yeah.
who you audition for them, and it's almost like if you get in, then you're going to military school.
It really is almost like military school. And there's all the SM Entertainment, which is the one that the BBC are doing this show, the JYP as well. But yeah, they you come and live with these people. You are put through rigorous training, singing training, dancing training. But sometimes for 2 years, 3 years, they can spend millions and millions turning you into what they want you to be.
You sign a contract, and if you leave during the contract, you have to pay back any money that's been spent on not just your board and lodging while you're in the process, but also whatever they deem the value
Yeah.
of your training to be.
And those contracts, by the way, can be 10 years.
Yeah.
So you literally you sign away an awful lot. You sign it. They are in charge of your diet. They're in charge of your look, of your image. They're in charge of your social media output. These are all things that are very, very carefully controlled. That said, some of these kids end up in massive multi-million-pound bands and make a fortune. And
What's wrong with indentured poppitude?
What is
wrong with it?
Wrong with indentured poppitude? You are quite right. But it's an extraordinary system. So this reality show will be a very, very interesting thing to watch, I think, because it goes slightly beyond what we imagine the world of creating a manufactured band is. It's like the army, but for pop music.
Yes, and Nigel Hall, who's one of the producers,
Yes,
was very instrumental behind the scenes with One Direction,
Yeah.
as via the X Factor, and it will they've billed as they're going to go there and experience the culture. I wonder how much of it you'll be able to see, because it is totally brutal.
Yeah.
And some people, as they say, these ones will, because they're going to be they've chosen them very carefully, but they call it you don't debut. So you could never be launched onto the K-pop scene at all, having gone through all of this. And then
you have to graduate essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. They said, which is SM Entertainment, which is one of the big agencies, which is the one doing this particular one, said this collaboration signifies our first footprint in Europe. Our expansion blueprint will continue to expand across North America. But you can see why they want to do it, because there's something they want to bring people along who haven't necessarily been brought along in these processes. They need to give you the behind the music.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can seem like, obviously not for lots of young people and not for children who feel like instinctively part of this world and understand it. But in order to get other people along who are going to buy the singles or, download you millions and millions and millions of times, you've got to have the story behind it all. And we've seen so much. It's like the next generation of those type of programs. We see, that go back to Pop Idol and the X Factor and all those things miles away.
Yeah, it's like Drive to Survive, but for Pop Idol. And as you say, it's not an elimination show. It's 5 people, so it's sort of like an ob-doc. Observational documentary about this process. Obviously, they're going to have to leave a lot of things out, I think, because it is a brutal process, and a lot of the personal freedoms that you have to give up, I think, is not something that's going to.
It remains a BBC show, so it's going to. It'll be interesting to see how that works on a compliance front, anyway.
But it's a fascinating world. It's a fascinating culture, and quite apart from this thing of the almost military regime and the drills, is the way that they connect with fans, and that's a very particular thing in K-pop. Is you have to be available to your fans. It's a sort of parasocial relationship between the bands and the fans. There's an awful lot of philanthropy in the world of K-pop. There are an awful lot of mental health programs and charities that are set up. There's a huge amount of social media output. So it's a whole world. I mean, it all comes from the fact that Korea itself is not big enough to make billions and billions in, because as a country, and so it's this expansion across the world, and social media knows no barriers and knows no boundaries. So they're incredibly targeted and incredibly forensic about the way they use social media. All of the bands have quite a lot of members, and here's the fun thing: if you take that and you lose a couple of members, that's tricky. If you're BTS and you lose a member,
17.
You got 7 other of them. BTS, by the way, who are the hugest of the K-pop bands, and filled Wembley, are huge in America, 4 number 1 albums in America. They are all, apart from one of them who's just finished, they're all on compulsory national service at the moment, national military service. So they've had to give up for a couple of years. So they'll be back in the middle of 2025, because in Korea you have to do military service. And that sort of gives you a clue, I suppose, to how this system continues. Because if you're going to be doing that for a couple of years anyway, you might as well be doing it in the service of
Yeah.
dancing and singing and making yourself a millionaire. I sort of guess it. I sort of get it. But, given that I think famously in the UK we don't have national service, and,
So close.
it's been
So
mentioned,
close.
you know what, so close.
Yeah.
If
Just like,
only you guys had believed and we had Rishi in, we'd have national service now. And imagine what it would have done to our music industry in 5 years' time. So I think it's going to be a fascinating look behind the scenes. I think people are in the situation, especially if you've got kids, where you understand what K-pop is, and and the music is great, by the way. If you like a bit of hip hop, a bit of dance, it's good stuff. But it will show you quite what this system
I think it's
is.
interesting if you have kids like that. So many of them look over to Seoul as
Yeah.
as their sort of as a huge primary influence, and in this, and just don't see America
Yeah.
in the same way that you or I did when we were growing up, which
Exactly.
was without any question the center of the cultural universe.
Yeah.
And before I ever saw that New Yorker cartoon where it's like Fifth Avenue, Seventh Avenue, and then the rest of the world is just like some random thing. That's what I thought of New York as the complete center of the world, but they don't think of it in that same way. And I'm really hoping to go to Seoul. I so want to go. But friends of mine who've been say that it just feels like it's because at the same time, what we know about it and much of the culture that's come out of it is really dystopian. And you look at things like, I don't know, Parasite or Squid Game, and it tells stories about a very dystopian kind of turbo capitalist society. It's obviously a hugely sexist society, and yet it feels for many young people like a place of possibility, which I think is quite interesting. It's a real contradiction. They had a fantastic exhibition at the V&A, I think a couple of years ago, called Hallyu, which means the Korean wave. And something I hadn't realized at that time was just how many of their K-dramas come from what are called webtoons.
Yeah.
People make these really basic kind of lo-fi stories that you can just look at on your phone, and so much of it is allied to the technology in which they are sort of world leaders, and then what you want is your webtoon to get bought up and then to get made into a K-drama itself. But it just feels it feels like a younger place, and where lots more where more can happen for a young person than in some ways, when you look at, I don't know, central London, where no one young can afford to live anymore, where young people and creative minds are pushed out to the deep outskirts of the city. It doesn't feel like that. Yes, at the same time, clearly it's a contradiction, because it is nonetheless still a very patriarchal society, and there are all these kind of old-fashioned things. There was an amazing photo that I saw in that exhibition where the kind of gleaming tower blocks are just starting to be put up, but in the foreground of the picture is a guy ploughing the earth with an oxen, with an ox with a wooden yoke across its back, and then in the background these things are being put up, and it's they couldn't really travel abroad till 88.
I mean, countries that
The Olympics was one of those.
Yeah.
Their Olympics was one
Yeah.
of those, like, announcing yourself to the world Olympics that were you don't, perhaps we don't see in the same way, not since Beijing anyway.
That white heat of modernization really accelerates a culture, doesn't it? And it really accelerates pride in a country, and it makes you want to show the world what you got. I do think that's fascinating, that idea, and I've seen that over and over again recently, that younger people are not interested in America and in American culture, or in going to America. It's impossible to overestimate what America was to us in our sort of teen years. It was like an impossible dream, in the films and the literature. And now it is absolutely, I often think there's not a huge amount of differences between the generations. I think that is a huge one.
I agree.
In that young generations have turned away from love of America and towards love of South Korea and Japan. That culturally seems to be a huge thing. Can I go on a sidebar?
Yes,
very,
please.
very briefly on this, because when I was thinking about these bands and the success of BTS and Stray Kids and Blackpink and these huge bands, I was talking to my niece who went to see Stray Kids at the weekend in Hyde Park, which apparently was absolute bedlam. And I'm old enough, I keep calling them the Stray Cats, because I remember the Stray Cats, the rockabilly band from the 80s, who you only now see on Top of the Pops 2 on BBC 4. So anyway, went to see Stray Kids, and I said, talk me through the appeal of K-pop. And we had a long chat about all the things we talked about this social media thing, and how good, how they're very good at individualizing the people within a collective, and how
did they have the light sticks? I always find those amazing.
They had like everything you
that
could
you connect with the people on the stage, but you feel the connection in a physical sense with these light sticks.
And amazing light shows, amazing videos, just the whole thing, a real piece of work. But one of the things she said was, "Oh, I like it because there aren't any bands anywhere else." And I was like, oh, do you know what? Yeah, of course there aren't any bands anymore. And so I'd done a little deep dive. There's a thing in the papers last week about no British acts have had a number one this year, and
Yeah.
that's a slight red herring because
Yes.
they had the previous years, and
Yeah.
Beyonce and Sabrina Carpenter have really dominated. But what has happened that is utterly extraordinary in the charts is the complete disappearance of bands. The complete disappearance of bands, and so soloists and duos, and collaborations of soloists, Dave and Central C, all this sort of thing,
Yeah.
are so dominant. I'll tell you how dominant they are. We've had half a decade, okay, roughly so far. The first half of the 2020s. So I looked at the first half of the 1980s, and in the first half of the 1980s, there were 146 weeks when bands were number one. Okay, 146 weeks. You had Dexys, you got UB40, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Duran Duran, Culture Club, Pretenders, Spandau Ballet, Adam and the Ants, loads
Yeah.
and loads and loads, 146. The first half of the 90s, there were 141 weeks when bands were number one. New Kids on the Block, Wet Wet Wet, Erasure, Take That, loads and loads. So we've got 146, 141. In the first 5 years of this decade, 3 weeks.
No.
We have had 3 number one weeks, one of which was the Radio 1 Live Lounge All Stars, most of whom were soloists anyway. One of which was the Beatles, when they had the lovely comeback single, and one of which was Little Mix, and that's the only kind of official band who've had a single week at number one in this entire decade.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
Is it sort of a sort of hyper individualization of things nowadays? And you see it in comedy as well. We talked before about why you don't really see very many sketch shows, and stand up is such a sort of a magnetic thing, sort of the individual gladiator, as it were.
Yeah, I think 100% that. I think also, there are various cultural things in that, if you come from, the London grime scene, then it's very individualized on. So people will collaborate an awful lot, but you wouldn't collaborate necessarily in a band. So there's lots of little reasons. But essentially, if you look at all of those names and the bands who are around, and everyone was in a band, no one is in a band anymore apart from all these Korean bands. There's even this week's top 40. There is not a single band formed in this century in the top 40 of the singles charts or the album charts this week. Not a single one. I think Coldplay are in there after their Glastonbury performance. They're like number 19, and the Lightning Seeds are in there because of But there's not a single band formed this century in the top 40 singles or album charts. I mean, that's crazy, right?
That's extraordinary.
In the top 40 biggest selling albums of the year, 2 bands formed this century. One, the Arctic Monkeys, formed in 2002. They're in there. So there is one of the best-selling 40 albums this year that is done by an actual new band, a new British band, and that's the band The Last Dinner Party.
Yeah, I was about to say Last Dinner Party.
Yeah.
And they've had so much airplay. Part of the reason is that it's fun to get a band on the sofa when they're all talking, and you've got dynamics rather than one person just telling you their chat show anecdote.
I mean, bands are great, is the truth. And weirdly, the last great era of the bands was that X Factor era. Little Mix, JLS, One Direction. That was the last time. But indie bands have completely disappeared from the charts. Rock bands have disappeared from the singles charts, definitely. It's all gone. But it feels like maybe there's a comeback.
Yes, since in K-pop it is so completely popular.
But so far this decade, 3 weeks of bands being at number one in the UK singles charts.
That is absolutely mind-blowing.
Crazy, right?
This deep dive.
That's an absolute
I'm going to be
pleasure.
thinking about that all week.
And by the way, I did that all myself. So if there may be the odds. Don't look at every single one of the numbers. It might not be 146 weeks. It might be 100. Yeah, exactly. But it's that's nuts, right?
Absolutely.
I kept just going through again and again and again, just going, this cannot be
something.
right. There's no way this is right. But there it is.
Wow, thank you for doing that.
It is an absolute pleasure. So I know that's not about Korea, really. So that's,
no, but it is. It relates to what you said.
Yes, exactly that. But that show Made in Korea, the K-pop experience, which is coming out on the BBC later this year. I think it'll be a good one.
I'll definitely be watching it.
Yeah, and talking about bands and money and so on. I believe we had a wonderful wedding to celebrate this week.
The wedding of Anant Ambani and Radhika Merchant, who are scions of 2 extremely rich families, and they had their wedding in Mumbai at the weekend over several days. They had already had pre-wedding celebrations. The pre-wedding party. Rihanna did it. She said, "I'm here tonight in honor of Anant and Radhika." bracket, she's also there for $9 million, but we'll come to that later.
She's just a friend of the family.
They had obviously like, Katy Perry, Andrea Bocelli, all of that's the pre-wedding party, Justin Bieber. Then this weekend they've had big nuptials in Mumbai. How about some of the guests?
Blair was there.
Yeah.
By which I mean Tony, not Lionel. Johnson was there. By which I mean Boris, not Dwayne The Rock.
Yeah.
The Kardashians.
The Kardashians, yeah. There's 100 of them, but there's only one set of Kardashians, so we can't continue the joke. And basically we don't know who provided the musical entertainment, but because of those earlier gigs, people had said it's going to be Adele and it's going to be Drake. Now, you will not see pictures of that occurring if it occurred, but private gigs have become a huge business. It used to be that back in the old days, no one really did private gigs. It was regarded as really uncool. If you were at that sort of, I'm now doing the conventions level of fame, like I'm a sort of faded star, as I'm talking about it perhaps in kind of cult sci-fi things, TV things. You were the equivalent of that in the music industry, although probably richer. And so nobody cool did these. It was not a young person's thing. Now, young people in particular just don't even have any qualms about doing this. There are NDAs that cover their appearances, but almost anyone now will do it. I spoke to an agent about this. He said it's just honestly quicker to say who won't do it. And obviously Taylor Swift won't do it. For some reason, AC/DC won't do it.
Really? Oh, that's
I
nice.
slightly love. Bruce Springsteen won't do it. And there's some dispute as to whether U2 will or will not do it. But pretty much just consider the whole rest of the roster of any talent agency will do it. And there are various reasons for that. But you can get into trouble with these private gigs.
Right, okay.
Tell
us more. I was hoping you could.
Yeah, exactly. And you were hoping it might be Sting as well. Yes. In 2009, Sting played for the daughter of a sort of Uzbek tyrant and took a load of heat for it because people discovered it. J-Lo played for the leader of Turkmenistan in 2013. And then that blew up, of course, because people found out about it. It's like, sorry, how much money is enough? Had there been knowledge of human rights issues of any kind, Jennifer would not have attended.
I'd love this if they said that had there been knowledge of any human rights issues of any kind, they would not have booked J-Lo.
Yeah, but it's also like, hi, J-Lo's agent, do you have the internet? Because these are not difficult things. We just need to go to the top paragraph of the Wikipedia entry. You don't even need to get down into the controversy section. Yeah. Okay. So
I love a controversy section.
Yeah, so do I. It's my favourite bit. I don't like any entry not to have them, and I believe that everyone should have some in their bio. But
now that sound is a million people adding a controversy section to your Wikipedia page.
I think there's probably already one there. Lionel, I haven't looked at it in a while. Lionel Richie, a lot of people did the Gaddafis. A lot of people played for the Gaddafis. Lionel Richie played for the Gaddafi. Nelly Furtado, 50 Cent, Mariah. Beyonce did it. Usher.
Really?
Mariah Carey said
I would always have an usher at a wedding.
Yeah, you have to. Team of them. I was naive and unaware of who I was booked to perform for, said Mariah Carey of Colonel Gaddafi. I feel horrible, embarrassed to have participated in this mess.
That's amazing. I mean, that really is. That's what you don't even need to.
Well, she's
Google.
Famously from a gilded cage, isn't she? She's a butterfly in a gilded cage. So this is perhaps...
She's an expensive one.
Yeah, she is an expensive one. Nicki Minaj, Angola. I mean, some of these countries, It's like, I had no idea.
It's interesting because the amount of people who have the sort of money to be able to throw at these, by and large, it's quite hard to make that amount of money without turning a blind eye to something or other, isn't it?
Yes, and
so it should be, can you afford me? Then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first times that people started doing these, that people who weren't kind of desperate started doing these, they would sort of do, I don't know, the Bank of America or Citibank or something, and then you'd go and do a very short set in Manhattan, and you might find like even Billy Joel or Crosby, Stills and Nash or someone like that would do it. But then when the .com money started coming, people would just do, they would say, can you do your one hit, whatever it was, if it sort of seemed like it reflected their brand message, then can you do that to open our conference? But the thing is, as we know now, streaming has really revenues have really dried up in the streaming era. And you can get such a lot of money for these. People are doing $3 million a birthday party. And they're doing birthday parties, bar mitzvahs. That, to be really clear, they're doing really small events.
Yeah. if the money's right.
One guy I was reading, he said, I went onto a boat and there were three guys, and I did, trying to get the crowd going.
They got the owner of Fulham had a private party on his yacht, and there's footage of Noel Gallagher really phoning it in.
Yeah.
On there, and no doubt getting £250,000 or something.
And that, I mean, in America,
and by the way, that's no shade on either of them, because
No.
it's a good thing to have at your party, and it's a nice amount of money to have. So I think both sides did the right thing there.
Yes, I don't think he got that much in some ways, which tells you, because Celine Dion used to get 6 million. Beyonce did one. She opened a hotel, and she got the Atlantis in Dubai. She got $24 million for that.
That's
now,
amazing.
You see, it becomes a huge thing. So if you're getting 3 million, and you do 10 birthday parties a year, that is 30 million on your to your revenue streams. And now all these musical artists really have to be diversified in a way they didn't used to before, since streaming. So this is why they all have their gin brands and their makeup lines or whatever it is, because if you're not in various businesses, you're not in enough business to sort of support what you're in. Now, CAA, we've talked about them before, the kind of big, huge talent agency in LA. They've got a whole division that does private events. They brought in, I can't remember what they brought. A couple of years ago, they were bringing in more than 200 million. So it's a big part of the business for anyone.
I was talking to someone in a very big band, not my brother, but talking about doing these private things, and various big bands and heritage bands and all sorts of things. And he was saying, you're at these events and actually no one is watching the band. These are weddings where huge things are going on. So you're literally paying to say that the band have played at your wedding. So, if J-Lo's playing at your wedding, you'll probably be out because there's free food and booze in the other tent.
Yeah.
So actually, this is not like a huge gig where everyone's going crazy. It's firstly, you can say that they have played. And secondly, I know this Ambani wedding is slightly different, but a lot of what you're paying for is, if you sign up to these gigs, you also sign up to selfies, you sign up to meet and greets, you sign up to sort of glad hand everybody.
Mentioning the birthday boy by name on the stage, all this sort of stuff.
All of that stuff. And just so on everyone's Instagram for the next week is a picture of that star or that band with the people who were at the wedding. And that's really what you're getting for your £2-3 million, not kind of 10 minutes of hits, because there's very few bands. I was reading, I was thinking, who would I like to play at my wedding? If you were getting married tomorrow and you could book any act in the world to play at your wedding, so it would go off, who would you choose?
Taylor.
Oh, I suppose
obviously,
so.
just for the fact of saying, Taylor's coming along later.
Yeah.
And
This is no shade to you, but would you not feel slightly that she might steal some of the limelight?
I'd live with it.
Do you think?
Kieran would have some folk tent going over at the side.
That would be good to go.
By the way, no one's going in there. No one's going in there.
No one's watching that Nick Drake tribute act, don't you? Shall I tell you who I would have? And you can book him for $3 million, according to what I've seen. Bruno Mars. There's a guy who could rock a wedding, right?
Yeah, there is a guy who can rock a wedding, and I bet he sings for his supper.
And he's got love songs during your supper as well. So that's the interesting thing. I mean, I guess this might be a slightly different issue, but the world of corporates and of corporate events for comedians and presenters and stuff like that, I don't really do them, but a lot of people do. And it's exactly that thing that you're saying, which is, if you're a band or you're a comedian, you can go, people can get 30, 40 grand to go and do someone's conference or to give out awards or something like that. No footage of it appears on TV, so you can use whatever material you want. They all kind of write stuff, meet and greet. You have, you sing for your supper, you have dinner with people. But that industry is absolutely enormous.
Maybe Boris Johnson, who famously did do a lot of corporates, was actually at this wedding on a corporate.
Listen, if the money's there, and no one's ever going to know about it.
It's really interesting. Young artists apparently are they don't even have one. They're like, yeah, no, of course I do this. They don't have 1 second of saying, yeah, I don't know, is it a bit of a sellout? And then you have to wait for your agent to say, no, everybody does it. All these big bands do it. Young artists are just like, yeah, no, I'll do that.
Well, the trouble is, because young artists, by and large, because of the economics of the business they're in, the music business, they have not been able to rely on record sales. So they've had to rely on brand partnerships. They've had to rely on, advertising and things like that. So to them, it's absolutely, well, this is what I've always done and what I always will do. So, yeah, I absolutely get it.
And in some ways, it's sort of as old as the arts itself, the idea of this kind of patronage where someone very rich will paint. This is half the pictures in Renaissance Italy, but like, oh, and this is the member of the family somehow meeting the deities. You're telling them to do. They have to do it for you, and that you're paying them to do it. And I don't know. Mozart was doing this, really. I suppose lots of people were doing it,
Yeah.
weren't they? I mean, yeah.
Mozart played Attila the Hun's daughter's wedding.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
didn't he? And he said,
you're constantly having to play.
He said, I had no idea about it. He was from Spain at that point.
These are the Spanish.
I was thinking, what's an Austrian accent? And should I tell you something? It wasn't that. But there's that amazing crossover somewhere in society. You see it in London all the time of billionaires and celebrities, and they both have something that the other wants, because the billionaire wants to be loved and the celebrity wants to be a billionaire, and so they're absolutely symbiotic, and it's hilarious if you ever have to see. It's sort of an awful dance.
Yeah, a terrible transactional dance. But and the other thing I suppose we should say is that there are many, many more billionaires, and they wish to flaunt it in this particular way. It's sort of dried up about the dot-com boom, as I say, was a start, and people started, there was different type of money in the market, and people started getting them to open their conferences and things like that. But the migration to private gigs is now absolutely enormous, and there is a status thing. And one of my friends this weekend was showing me all these things, like if you go to restaurants in the south of France, or clubs, and you're the one who orders the bottle of this or that, and the displays have become bigger and bigger and bigger of how it is brought to the table, that there are dancers coming, and there's a fireworks, and everyone in the club has to sort of clap at the same time as utterly hating you, and it's that level of sort of conspicuous. But it is also, we should say that it's not always all put on social media, and the reason we haven't seen any of this is because if Adele is going to agree to do it, she will say, the whole thing is covered by NDAs. No one is allowed to post a single photo of it.
Well, that's it. If you're Adele, you can get the best of both worlds, which is you can get all that money, and she's so big, so you can say, I don't want anybody.
It's not clear that it even happened. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. By the way, it may not have done. It
may not have. Well, the names that have been mentioned are nothing so far, so I think it will come out who. But it will just be a matter of rumour, and there will be no comment made on it at all. But it is huge business. It's
going to be Liberty X.
Yeah. I'm
absolutely certain of it.
They can.
They would. Do you know what?
Flail a floor.
They would be great. Yeah. They would be great at a wedding, Liberty X. Paul McCartney, when he last got married, that's a tough gig to be the band, right? Do you know who he booked for his wedding?
I thought he did it in his own back garden, and some people complained.
Did they?
Unbelievable. There were some people who looked out to the window in St John's Wood and were like, sorry, it's getting quite late now. So,
yeah.
Okay, Paul McCartney's playing in his back garden. I can't speak about you. I have nothing to say, but you're dead in your soul.
He booked Mark Ronson.
Did he?
That was his music act. And do you know what Mark Ronson charged?
What?
0. Of course, because it's Macca.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So yeah, he did it for nothing, as you would. If Paul McCartney asked you to play his wedding, you would.
You're not trying to haggle over it.
Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing is, it is almost impossible to think of any band, however cool they might be, however countercultural they might be, whatever their public pronouncements on things might be, who do not at some point take some
of this. And this was never the case.
Corporate money.
This is a complete sea change. This was never the case.
Yeah.
It used to be very, very, very uncool.
But it's tough to make money in a band.
Yeah.
Now, any recommendations this week?
I'm actually recommending an article. It's in the London Review of Books, but it is about the Beckhams and about that Beckham biography by Tom Bauer. And Andrew O'Hagan has done a really funny and sort of detailed review. I always find the reviews in the London Review of Books are so good. It's like, okay, I don't have to read the book now. And I'm not sure you would particularly want to read the Beckham book, but the review is such fun, and I strongly recommend. You can read it online.
One thing I can't recommend is Beverly Hills Cop 4, because we were going to talk about it this week.
Oh my God.
Neither of us have watched it.
I know. Well, there's
so we must
events have overtaken us.
Yes, exactly.
But we will have watched it by next.
Yeah, we said that last week. So can people believe us?
I don't know whether people can believe
this. Is why
I will have watched it, because I'm going to now collapse after an electoral and sporting frenzy.
Do you know what? Cut to us in like every podcast takes 7 months. In a couple of years' time, they go, "You used to do podcast. You used to do 2 a week, didn't you?" And we go, "Yeah, I know, but it's difficult. The writers' room didn't start till kind of May."
Yeah, we do. The next episode will be 15 hours, but we don't. There's nothing we can cut. There's nothing we cut. It's so good. There's nothing we can cut.
Yeah, we got. I'm afraid we got Marina's notes in and Richard's notes, and I think we have to. If we do all of them, it's going to be 47 hours. But and this is Peter Jackson, by the way, who at that point is directing the whole thing. We'll continue to knock out 2 a week, because that's the business. You can't listen. You can't say
Always
show
on,
business.
Richard. We're always on.
Can't say show business without saying business. Or show questions and answers on Thursday.
Absolutely. Certainly questions.
And is there an email address people can write to?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Obviously, I'm already starting the Thursday episode meltdown. The email address is therestisentertainment@gmail.com. Please contact us on that and see you Thursday.
See you Thursday.